Hi guys, Gabi from UiPath Hacks here. Today's video is a full tutorial on DataTables and DataRows. It will be a longer video but really value packed. So grab a cup of coffee and let's start. We're all using data tables, sometimes without even realizing it. Every time you're using a framework, data tables are the core of it. Every time you're reading or writing to an Excel file, the input or output are actually data tables that you afterwards go through with a for each row activity. But in today's video, we will focus more on working at the data table level. We will see how a data table can be initialized, generated, and afterwards displayed, how it can be filtered, sorted, joined, or merged, and how we can look up data in it. We will also see how we can interact with tables at the level of their rows by adding or removing rows. So let's start with the data table initialization. We have two main ways to do that, either from scratch or by reading it from an external file like Excel. And to make this go faster, I've already predefined some code here, and we will just basically comment and uncomment pieces of it just to go faster. To initialize it from scratch, we can use the build data table activity. I'll just drag it here to demonstrate and observe that it comes with a predefined row. We can change its header, we can add new column names, we can change their data types, we can change the order of the columns, move them around with drag and drop, and we can delete rows directly here if they are hard-coded. We generally don't want to have too many hard-coded things, so we can delete the initial row. But anyways, I've already predefined my data table here, and we will have information about house prices, a city, square meters, if it has or not a garden, and a price. In practice, however, we will probably read the data from an Excel file, so let's do that now. I have here an Excel file with some house market information. I'll just open it quickly. So I have the same columns, and I have a few cities with information on square meters, number of rooms, if they have garden or not, and the price. And we can use a read range activity to get the data loaded into the table. As an output, we are just logging it for now with an output data table activity, but we could further write it to an Excel file or pass it over as an argument to another workflow. Now let's see how we can add or remove rows to the data table. We have dedicated activities for that. I have here an add data row activity already filled in, and this allows us to either add an existing data row if we already have it, or create a row by entering an array of data. So if we have a data row variable, we can put it here. And if not, we can just create an array like this with curly brackets and commas between the values. And this will add this data row to our table. So let's see that. I will comment this first activity. I will comment this one as well. We will start with our Excel file, which has 4 rows, and we will be adding this additional row with the house in Leipzig, and then output the data table and log the message. So let's run, and we have now 5 rows, the last one being Leipzig. So it has added this row from this array of data, from the add data row activity. And we can also see how we can delete rows from the data table. Here we take our data table, dt_houses, and we are removing the row index number 1. And please note that the numbering of the rows is starting with 0. So if we are using row index 1, it is actually going to delete the second row, not the first one. So we expect now to run again and not to have Frankfurt anymore in the list. Let's run it. And there you go, Frankfurt is out. All right. I'll comment this back. Now let's have a look at the other predefined activities we can perform on data tables. Filtering the data table is one of them. And it's quite useful when we want to select just a few rows that meet a certain criteria, just like in Excel. So we have a filter wizard for that. We select an input data table, our DT houses, and we can have an output data table as well. We select if we want to keep or remove the rows that meet this criteria here. In this case, we have the price less or equal than 300,000. And we could also filter or drop some columns as well, but we will just filter for the rows right now. So let's run this. We expect to see only the houses which have a price under 300,000. And from our 5 houses here, we have only Leipzig, which meets the criteria with 160,000. And just to pay attention to something, when we were adding this data row here as an array, I've put this value as a number. If I would have put it as a string by mistake, I would have gotten no error. But if I run this, I have no results for the filtered data table. So just to keep this in mind, if you have some strange behavior, just test to see what data types are your values and make sure you have them right. All right, so that's about filtering. I will comment this back. Now, what to do when we have some unstructured data and we want to put it in a data table format? We can use the generate data table activity. We basically feed it a string variable. We can test it as a sample input here, and it will try to generate a data table from it. And we can see the preview here just as a test. It is like a deserialize for data tables, if there was such a thing. Or basically the opposite of output data table, because in the output data table, we get a string from a table, and here we basically get a table from a string. So let's take an example. I will just copy paste an example here, basically adding a new row to our data table, or generating a table similar to the one we had before. And we have here 2 rows separated by the enter, and between the columns we have space. So for column separator we have space. For line separator we have a new line, and we can take the CSV parsing. We can leave the auto detect column types on, and we can say the first row is the column header. And let's preview. That's correct. We have here the column headers. Basically, it also determines the types here because of the first tick. So a city is a string. This is an integer value. This gets it as a string, and this is integer value as well. So this is a way we can basically generate tables from strings if we ever have to do that. All right. And yeah, here basically in real life we will have a string variable. We have here its value. If you want to enter, we have this environment dot new line, and then the other data. So basically this will just generate a table. We will not do anything further with it in this example, but this is how I can do it. All right, so let me comment this back. And the next activity on data tables is the join activity. We have 2 input data tables and 1 output data table. And there are 3 types of join. The inner join keeps all the rows from the first and second tables which meet the join rule. So here we say we have different operations, equal, greater, or less than, or different than, and we can put here, we can select basically a column from the first table and the column from the second one and compare the values. So If we use here inner, it's basically going to keep all the rows from the first table and the second one which meet this join rule. And rows that do not meet the left and rows that do not meet the rule are removed from the resulting table. If we use here left, it keeps all the rows from the first table and only the values from the second table which meet the join rule. Null values are inserted into the column for the rows from table 1 that don't have a match in the table 2 rows. And a full join keeps all the rows from the first and second data tables regardless of where the join condition is met. And null values are added into the rows of both tables that don't have a match. So let's see this running. Let's use first the inner join. We have our initial data table and our construction year data table, which we have just created here. We have here 3 lines, cities and their construction year. It's a typo here. All right, so let's run this with inner join, where we are basically checking if the first column, so the city name, is equal in the 2 tables. So we'll join them based on the city name, and let's run it with inner. See what's happening. We have our first table here with 5 rows, and the result is 3 rows, so Heidelberg, Berlin and Munich, the ones which are present also in the second data table, and it has added also the additional column of the construction year at the end. So it has kept only the rows from the first and second tables where the city name is the same. All right, if we select left for the inner join and run, let's see what will happen. We have our 5 rows here, and the result is we have also 5 rows. It has added the construction year where it had it in the second table, and for the last 2 columns where there was no construction year, it has just added a null value, basically nothing. So for the left join, it kept all the 5 rows from the first table and added the values from the second table where the values were present. And let's test the last type of join, full join. So here the result is basically the same as the left join in this case, because we have only common cities. But let's modify this and add another value here. Let's put a city that is not in the first data table and see what's happening if we use a full join. You see, it has basically added a 6th line because Kiel is in the second table and not in the first one, and the full join keeps all the rows from both tables. And it basically has no information for the first fields, but just adds Kiel and the construction year at the end. So this is how join works, how the 3 types of join take effect: inner, left and full. All right, so let's comment this back and let's move to the next activity on data tables, and that is merging data tables. Here we basically concatenate one table to another. So we have a destination data table and a source one, and the source table is added to the destination one. So basically the destination table is being extended. Notice here the missing schema action property. It can get different values: add, ignore, error, or add with key. And this is going to decide basically what should be done if the 2 tables do not have the same columns as well as the same data types. So let's see first our data. We have here this data table additional houses, where we have 2 additional cities with pricing information. And we have here just a quick test one, where we have 1 city and 1 additional dummy column. Okay, so if we're going to merge here our additional table for houses with our original one, we can use ignore for now, just to demonstrate what's going to happen. Let's run this. And we have our 5 initial rows plus the last 2 ones from this additional houses table. We can use ignore if we are fairly certain that our column set is the same on both tables, but this will ignore any extra columns in the source table. So if we have here some additional columns at the end, let's put a test here and some dummy values and run again. We see that we have our lines here, but it has dropped the additional columns at the end because that column was not present in the first data table. All right, let's look at the other options for missing schema action. Using error, we'll just throw an exception for any kind of mismatch, either in number or column names or in their column types. And using add, we'll add the additional columns from the source to the destination and the respective rows separately with blanks on the columns that are not common. So let's try out the add one, and let's use this DT test as well. So let's say we want to add the DT test to our DT additional houses. So we have our table with 2 lines here, and we have another table with one of the cities, just a dummy value. Let's run this. So, okay, sorry, I have to update this output table as well. All right, let's run again. All right, so we have here our merge. We have our 2 rows and we have the third one. It has added also here, we see the comma at the end, which wasn't there. It means that it has added a null value also for the first 2 rows where it was missing the dummy value. And we have our third row here with just Dresden and its dummy value, but no information for pricing. And there is also a last option here, add with key. This is like add, but with the primary key. However, I did not really play with this option so far. All right, so let's comment this back. One activity that I've been using quite a lot is the lookup activity. If you're a friend of the Excel VLOOKUP function, you will like this one. It is basically doing the same thing. The lookup value is what you are searching for on the first column. Let's say we want to find out the price of the apartment in Frankfurt. We can use Frankfurt as the lookup value and column index 0 or column name city. Then for the value we want returned, we can specify the target column. So we want to return the price. We can do it by name or by index again. And then return everything in this string variable, str looked up price. And then we are logging the message, we are logging this string value, and let's see what's happening. I will just comment this for now because we'll play with it a bit later. So let's run. And we have the lookup price for Frankfurt is 500,000. That's correct. Okay, so we have looked up in this table the value Frankfurt and we got the price. It's exactly like a VLOOKUP function in Excel. All right, that's nice. But let's make this a bit more complicated. What do we do when we want to look up a value based on 2 columns? For example, one is the city where an apartment with 30 square meters costs 160,000 euros. We can't look up on 2 columns for the same time. There's no option for that. We have only one here. So let's ask ourselves, what would Excel do? We could filter the first data table after the first criteria, say square meters, for example, and then look up the one with the right price. So 2 different activities. Or we could concatenate the 2 columns with the key information, so square meters and price, and then look up the concatenated value. So 30 and then 160,000. But let's go for the first approach, as it will be faster to implement in UiPath. So I've already put the code here. So basically I've put a filter here, and I'm filtering the original data table houses. I'm copying it in these filtered houses, and the filter condition is that the first column, the column number 1, which means basically the second column, so the one with square meters, is 30. So I'm filtering the original table, and I'm getting a second data table only with the rows that are meeting this criteria of having the value 30 for square meters. That would be Leipzig, basically, only this row. We could have also more, in this case it's only one. So I'm getting a second table from the first one that meets the first criteria for our lookup. And then inside this second table, which is filtered already, I'm looking up the value 160,000 for the price. I'm returning the city. Yeah, it's the other way around a bit. I'm looking here and I'm returning the city here. And you see, one difference to Excel is that we can look up based on a value, based on a column to the right, and return something to the left. We don't have to have the return column to the right of our search column. So that's nice. And we are going to return the value in the string lookup city and then display it. So let's run this. And the city where the 30 square meter apartment costs 120,000. Why is that? It's Leipzig. Okay, it's just a typo here. Just hard-coded. So there we go. Good. So the last table activity I want to demonstrate now is the sort activity. Let me comment this. And here we have this sort table, data table activity, and we have an input table, our original table for houses, and an output data table, our DT sorted houses. And this could be the same as the input one, so we can sort in the same data table. We don't have to have necessarily two separate ones. And we can sort on a column index or column name, and we can choose ascending or descending for the order. So let's say we want to sort on the price, that's index number 4, so column number 5. And we have the output to a string and the log message. Let's run this. So we have our original data table here and our sorted table here, where Leipzig is the first row now because it has the lowest price. And one last thing I would like to mention before closing this video is how to get the rows, cells, or columns of a table. And I have here just a few activities to demonstrate that. What if we want to display or work with a cell value? So this is how we can get to the cell, for example, the value on the first column, second row. We have our table, and then we have dot rows. And if we want the second row, we put here the value 1, because the row indexing starts with 0. And then we have item, and then we put 0 here because we want to return the first column, and then everything to string. So this will return basically first column, second row. It should be Frankfurt, right? So this is how we get the cell value with this kind of syntax. We will log that, and then just to see how we can get a data row or data column. So if we want to get the first line as a data row, this one with Heidelberg, then we just say that the house is rows 0, and this returns data row variable, dr test is a data row variable. And if we want to return the column, we basically say data table dot columns, and we put here 1. It means we will return the column with the square meters here. And this DC test2, it's a data column variable type. So we will just display basically the cell value now, and we expect to see here Frankfurt. And also what I've put here, I'm also displaying the type. So if you want to check what type your data is, if you get it from, for example, Excel, then you can get to the cell with this syntax and then use the get type to string, and this is displaying this system string. So Frankfurt is of the data type string. Alright, so this concludes the tutorial on data tables and data rows. We have seen how to create data tables and rows and how to display them. We have gone through different options like filter, join, merge, or lookup. And we have also seen how to access the rows, columns, or cells of a table. If you have found this to be useful, please hit the like button to incentivize the YouTube algorithm to promote this video to other people, and consider subscribing to be notified when I release more UiPath videos. Thank you for watching and have a great day.